So the focus of today is relationships and improving your relationships with yourself, with others, and with situations. And we're going to use the principle of identifying and understanding the controller saboteur. And the controller saboteur is the accomplice of the judge. And I want to begin by telling you 3 short stories about how my relationships were affected by this controller part of me, saboteur, that had made my relationships in a small way, but amplify in a bigger way later on. And the first one is going to be a patient relationship. And what happens for me sometimes is a patient comes in and they are not doing the thing that I had recommended. So in this case, this person had been diabetic and her A1C was in the 10s, and it's kind of been steadily at the 10s, and there was a recommendation for her to take more insulin, and then she didn't. So maybe there's been a time in your career where you offered some recommendations or advice to a patient and they didn't take it, and then their health suffered, and then how did you feel? And so for me, I would feel, and I did feel at the time, a little frustrated, a little annoyed, a little impatient. And just to say that when I do feel those experiences, then I know that the controller saboteur is speaking to me pretty loudly. So when I notice that I'm feeling frustrated, annoyed, impatient, those signals tell me that the controller saboteur is speaking a lot to me. And really, that's the number one tool here, is first to notice when the saboteur is speaking to you. That's how I knew. Another example is when, and this is with my staff, or actually my residents. I was in the room and I was noticing that the resident was thinking that she could speak Spanish well, but her Spanish was pretty remedial, and she was speaking directly to the patient without an interpreter. And I was starting to get a little angry and frustrated and impatient with this idea that the resident felt like they were ready to speak to the patient directly in Spanish. And then lastly, when my controller came in, was with my children. This is a third relationship. So my patient, a colleague, and then my kid at home. And my kid, I was in charge of getting her up out of bed so she could get to school. And I would go into the room and gently tell her to wake up and get ready for school. But then she wouldn't. She would just stay there and stay in bed. And then I noticed, what did I notice? I noticed I was getting impatient, frustrated, and annoyed. And so there's just the signal that the controller is upon me. And that's kind of like the principle number one, is just to notice. And, what I would do if the controller saboteur continued its voice and path is an action that would diminish the relationship that I had with the patient or my colleague or my child. So let's just go down that path for a second, because that's a path that we want to avoid, but is all too common in my life as far as how I let the controller get in the way of the relationships in my life. And again, this is about how do we improve our relationships through understanding our controller saboteur. So in the experience of the patient, what happened when I got frustrated and impatient was to I did end up understanding why she was not adhering to our recommendation of increasing her insulin to 35, for instance, and at the same time. And we got a chance to talk about, her beliefs and her concerns that, insulin, if taken at too high a level, is going to cause damage to her liver and her kidneys. And so that's why she was scared. And that was good. Like I got to understand her perspective. But my next step was actually to, because I was getting this impatient feeling, was to kind of just tell her, like, well, just do this. Command her or order her to just take the insulin 35 units, rather than what we'll talk about next, which is the SAGE approach. So you can see that just ordering your patient, just do the thing, could impact the relationship. In terms of my resident relationship, when I was noticing I was getting a little bit impatient or angry or even frustrated that this resident was speaking to the patient in, I would say, not proficient Spanish without an interpreter, what I could have said was, you're not allowed to speak to the interpreter anymore, and all residents just need to take a proficiency test before they are allowed to speak to patients. Let's just kind of make that happen, order that to happen. And I didn't do this, but I foresaw that if I had done that, my relationship with that resident and with many of the other residents may have been tarnished, because I'm just kind of laying down the law. And then thirdly, if I'd gone down my controller route with my child, which I did, I would gently try to wake her, and then she's not up. And then what I did do in the past was to say, okay, get up. It's time to get up. You're going to be late for school. So that was my controller approach to that. Now I want to talk about how we can use tools in our SAGE brain to recognize the controller and then find a path that is in our SAGE brain that improves relationships. But it's in the same situation. So the principle here is when you're noticing that your controller is upon you through feeling frustrated or angry or annoyed or all these things, that you first of all notice that, that I'm feeling this way. Number two is to recognize that this is, for me, Chris Yee, the controller. And then I want to talk about the very specific SAGE step here. And the very specific SAGE step, the tool that will improve your relationships with these in these three situations, is to use the SAGE powers of empathy and curiosity. And so these are the two tools specifically when you notice that your controller saboteur is upon you. So in this instance, how I could have used empathy and curiosity with my patient would have been to get a little bit more empathetic about, her view of medicine and also her context in life, and just understanding, like, I get it, injecting yourself with a medication that feels like too much can be feeling very damaging to your health. And then to get curious, and instead of just saying take 35 units, I could have said, yeah, I understand that it's difficult right now for you to just leap into taking more insulin. I want to, just what do you think works for you, as far as, because at this time she had agreed that she wanted to take more insulin, but maybe not the 35 units. Like, what would work for you, as far as how many units? And I don't know what she would have said. Maybe she would have said, well, I would feel comfortable taking 32 units. Let's go there, and I think that would be one way of being curious and empathetic, and then also improve our relationship, which is the important thing. What I ended up doing for the residents is that I noticed that I was getting frustrated about this one resident, and instead of just commanding the change, I created a little committee, which included Spanish interpreters, included the residents, included patients, to be involved in a protocol that would help help the residents to know that they were proficient to speak to patients directly in Spanish before. So we spent some time getting the perspectives of all the different stakeholders involved, and that was, again, my work of being empathetic towards all the different people involved, and then to get curious about what their perspective is and what their approach is. And lastly, with my child, when she was, not getting up for school, and I made many controller saboteur mistakes in this way by just like trying to order her around. In the end, I got really empathetic with her and said, "Oh, baby, I understand it's really hard to get up. If you were me, what would be the thing that you would want to help you to be able to get out of bed?" And she said, "Oh, Papa, I want you to, come and lay next to me and like gently stroke my face and say, 'Baby, it's time to get up now. Are you ready?'" And then she kind of role modeled like what she would want. So I did that the next day, um, and it worked beautifully because it's exactly what she wanted. And I got curious and allowed myself to get her ideas about what was going to work. So thank you for listening for this little focus of the day. Again, the focus here is relationships. How can we improve our relationships through the day? In this case, for me, was with my patients, with my staff and residents, and then with my child. And the way to do that is number one, to notice again, that my negative emotions. For me, it's frustration, anger, annoyance. When I notice those things, then I know that it's the controller saboteur that's probably speaking to me here. And then when the controller saboteur comes in, then I'm going to try these two tools, which is to use the sage powers of empathy and curiosity to understand what the other person might be experiencing, get their ideas about solutions for things. Well, thank you for being here today. And today, I wish for you improved relationships with your anyone you interact with, and just recognizing when the controller saboteur may be an obstacle to improving relationships, and that you find empathy and curiosity to improve relationships and to counteract the impact of your controller saboteur.